Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Veterans Action Council Roundtable. This will be Roundtable discussion number 3. This week's discussion will be taking place around being used as pawns this week. In the Washington Post, there was an article and various articles through the media stating how there's a shutdown deadline of the government nears as the White House and Congress tangle over VA funding. There's a different disagreement over concerns of how to classify $12.5 billion in cost increases to the veterans' health care expenses that are veterans' care packages signed into law by President Trump in 2018. So this led us to the idea of, all of us are active or gotten active uh, in our potential local environments politically and well as nationally. And so it led us to the idea of having this discussion. How do you feel about being used as a political pawn? We as veterans seem to be a hot button issue, and when things come down to it, it seems time and time again we get to be used as the linchpin. So I am, for one, am frustrated by it. I don't like hemming and hawing over how our veterans are treated, much less budgetary situations. We know that it is already, healthcare is expensive as is, and veterans' healthcare through the VA isn't necessarily the most quality in the world. So, how do you feel about being a political pawn? So, we're going to go through each of our Veterans Action Council members tonight. My name is Etienne Fontan. We have with us tonight Tony Landry, George Armstrong, Rico Pereda, Michael Krawitz, and Pearson Kennedy Crosby. So, I'm going to start with Mr. George Armstrong. He's in Pennsylvania. How do you feel about being a political pawn?
Well, I think, as you were saying, Etienne, none of us like it when veterans are used as pawns. So I think we've all seen it at different times. Being in this movement, many in the cannabis movement, just so everyone knows, veterans are many times, it seems like, paraded out on stage to talk about all of their problems and how they got through them. Um, and, and and that's really okay for a while, and it's a way to get the message out and everything's good. But after a while, it really seems like they're using the veterans for that shock factor, and that's where you start to feel like you're being used as political pawns um, in the industry. And as far as the politicians doing it to us, I think it's been a runaway train of us being used since the Vietnam veterans. If they're either completely ignoring the veteran community, especially when it comes to healthcare, mental health care, or they're going the other way where they're putting us out in front to use us as an example and then giving us no voice, which is the most important thing, giving us no voice as they're using us as an example. So I think that's the point I would hit on the first question, is that, when they, uh, as an American and certainly as service members, we feel like our voice should be heard. And so when any group goes out there and starts speaking for veterans, like that's not necessarily going to line up with what every veteran thinks. We're a very diverse community, so that's what I'd say about that one.
Thank you very much, George. We're going to take it on to Arizona and Mr. Tony Landry. Mr. Landry, what say you? How do you feel about being used as a political pawn?
Well, yeah, I've felt some of that, whenever I'm advocating in the Capitol. For instance, like if I'm in the Capitol with my American Legion hat on, I'll get noticed. You have legislators coming up and shaking my hand, but if not, you just walk right on by me. But yeah, I guess, and when you advocating, for instance, maybe for crippled crippled children or something, and you getting some funds for them through the government, through legislation, but no one's clamoring to have a bunch of wheelchair clinics, open up and make a ton of money. And with cannabis, it seems like the veterans are sticking their neck out there, getting, because let's face it, in a state where it's illegal, you stick your neck out when you come out and say, hey, let's change the laws so that this is not illegal anymore. So when we're being used or being asked to advocate for some legislation that's going to bring some financial gain to some business, yeah, I'll take issue with that. But I have to just do it because I just do it from my heart when I'm out there advocating. I just do it for the people that can't get out and advocate. So I have to put that aside, because if not, it brings a lot of animosity, anxiety, which is counterproductive in what I need to do. So I just kind of overlook that part of it and just keep the goal in mind that whatever laws that I can get changed, it's going to help the common man.
Thank you, Tony. We appreciate your perspective. Now we're going to go over to Rico Preda. Rico, how do you feel about being used as a political pawn?
Well, I don't like it. Nobody likes to be used, yet alone be used as a political pawn, right? It's frustrating, especially when you see the emphasis placed on honoring those who served, and all the flag waving and all the major events you go to, veterans paraded out front. But when it comes down to addressing situations that have impacts on our lives, such as our healthcare, the whole stick up in this budget battle that you mentioned is this expansion of from what I understand, the choice program that maybe Pearson can talk a little bit about when he comes up. That really started because Alaska didn't have services, and there were other like horrendous wait times, such as like the Phoenix VA to bring up Arizona, and other shortcomings of the VA, their inability to provide service to veterans. And so as a cannabis patient, I look at that and I look at all the flag waving, and I just understand and I realize that my choice isn't accounted for or really asked, for, my opinion on what would work for me, such as having access to cannabis, being able to talk to my physician in the VA, get recommendations from my physician to be able to participate in the state-run program that's expensive. The certification fees are like $300 for every 2 years. And I mean, flower just goes up and up. They're even talking about how it's going to go up even more because of all the testing standards and stuff that they're now implementing. But when we go to address these issues, we just we either get laughed at or out of the room. Basically told to get serious. Who's going to pay for you to get a drug or, go use a drug? And they just they put you down. Or me anyway, that's been my experience. And so again, it's frustrating knowing that your voice doesn't matter, while simultaneously, to go back to the last conversation, it's like, thank you for your service though. It's when they want something from you, they're real quick to bring you out in front of whoever they need to convince that they're vet friendly, so that they can get either a business relationship or a boat passed or something. And so it's just it's heartbreaking to see year after year after year, really.
I understand. I hear you, and I can feel you. Mr. Michael Crowitz, how do you feel about being used as a political pawn?
I was sitting here thinking about how to kind of break up my thoughts. And first, there's two separate categories. There's, within our cannabis movement, and then there's as a veteran generally. But then there's also, inside that, there's other categories as well. You have the you have sort of the in veterans issues, and then you have the sort of embedded issues, or sort of I don't know how to even put it. You get these distractions essentially. So, all right. So first of all, dealing with it directly: veterans healthcare, veterans services, veterans medical needs. We signed on to a understanding of international understanding of how humans should behave after World War II, after the debacle of human history that was World War II. And one of the basic things about that was this, what we call the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it's not a treaty, it's not like enforceable in that sense. It's actually presented and signed onto by all the countries that signed onto it, which is like everybody, as a basic standard of human behavior. Something that you don't have to enforce because it's universally accepted as a baseline and nobody crosses it. Almost in a way implying that everybody would be pissed off, not just somebody, if you don't. And there are human rights laws, and there are mechanisms, but generally the Declaration of Human Rights stands as just an instrument of purpose, of statement of fact in our world. And one of those is that you have the right to medical care, and we signed on to that. And that was something that Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access looked at and said, it would be nice if people recognize that you need medicine as part of medical care. We actually talked about and still promote the idea of adding, a couple of words to that Declaration of Human Rights. So it says you have a right to access medical care and associated medicine, right? But nonetheless, I say all this because veterans, right, follow me here, we're like 1% of the population of the United States, very small population when it comes to dealing with a population from the sense of the country's perspective. Number two, we're military veterans, meaning that we all passed multiple health exams to get into the military. We weren't broken down, beat up, falling apart when we joined the military. And our services, our hospital services, are based upon need and based upon our disability, our service-connected disabilities, which directly flow from our service to the country. So if we do become expensive to treat, that's not something that was what they call a pre-existing condition. That's usually 99.99% of the time something that we inherited from and brought home as a souvenir service. So why I'm saying all this is because the United States aspires to actually fulfill that mandate, human rights mandate. You can see it over time. It's jumped back and forth from Republican idea to Democratic idea. It's never been a nonpartisan idea. Somehow or another, it has jumped back and forth just in recent history from being a Republican idea to Democratic idea, this idea of universal health care. And, the attempt to get a little bit closer to that with what they call Obamacare faced, 100 different lawsuits. Not a single one of them did anything to undermine it. President Trump talked about having another plan on the table before he joined, the executive branch. 4 years later, we're almost at the end of his term. Still nothing, no plan, never put forward. And again, the reason why I'm saying all this is because if the United States can't handle a pretty healthy crew of 1% people that are going through the healthcare system and trying to get healthcare, adequate healthcare in a universal access way, and they can't handle us as a pilot program, let's say, as a canary in the coal mine, let's say. If they can't handle that, then what possible chance do they have of implementing an actual, working universal healthcare system? And I think that's the issue. That's a big issue. And then on the other side is just really interesting, something I learned years ago working on drug policy, that you get these very well-oiled, very, very old fights, these battles, and you wind up with tactics and strategies that are very distracted from the main mission of the battle. The perfect example from my past was we were fighting against a bill that we called the cocaine mom bill, and it would have had Virginia moms who were pregnant and tested positive for cocaine essentially chained to a hospital bed as they gave birth, have the baby ripped from their arms at birth and taken away and raised by someone else who doesn't do drugs, while this woman that gave birth is sent to jail unceremoniously, without any real assessment of whether that's the right thing to do or not, just on principle. And we fought that and killed that. But the reason why I bring that up is because the folks that were behind that didn't care a bit about the cocaine issue or any of that. It was actually a very kind of deep secondary, incremental approach to trying to create case law that showed that the unborn baby had human rights, part of the whole abortion battle. So man, abortion battle. I mean, we're talking about cocaine mom, and you're fighting this as an incremental step on something totally different. But I warn about that, because some of these choice plans and some of this stuff are presented by people who really just want to undermine the governmental system, want to privatize it and make it a private system. And we talked about that the other day on a different call. That can be really problematic in some places we've seen. Privatizing prisons has been an absolute nightmare. So privatizing some of this stuff can really have its downside that's unimaginable. So that's really a thought that you have to think about. Is this really a fight where they're just trying to do some abstract strategy on some long-term battle that's gotten into my area for some reason, or is this really genuinely about vets? And then about the movement, I sum it up really quick. In cannabis movement, I laid it out years and years ago at my first ASA meeting. I spoke about this stuff, and I said that the veterans want to be out front. We want to be participating in the movement, but don't call us in on the last day, the day of the press conference, to stand in front of the camera and say we're a veteran and just put us out there like a prop. We're not props. We want to be involved, in a very organic way from the beginning in the strategy and structurally part of this conversation. And both in defense of the mainstream movement and as a complaint against the mainstream movement, I would say that we haven't really been part of that very much. But again, in defense of the movement a little bit, I would say that it's just not geared for us. It's really, I'll just point to one thing before I give it back to you, and that is, we had this meeting with American Legion years ago when they were working, thankfully, on our issue for about a year or so, thanks to a great political director they had at the national level. And we met with him, Louis Celli, is a really great guy. And he was telling us what we should do. We should set up this and that, and create a pack and get, and we're like, wait a minute, we're working with the American Legion. We're never going to be as powerful as you. Why would we want to build the wheel again? But that's what they expect you to do, build the wheel again and again and again, just so that you can participate in this game. I think you and I and us, we feel like at this point, the government is trying to implement policies. We're not trying to explain the merits of this stuff anymore. We're not trying to teach anybody why we should do this anymore. They're doing it. This is happening. This is stuff that the government is undertaking. It's moving, and they should be coming to us for counsel. They should be seeking out our advice and helping us to be able to be constructively involved. A little bit, I would like to see. So we don't have to work so hard. But nonetheless, I think that's a challenge for us, that we need to make sure somehow that we are in the room, even though the room is not set up for us to participate. I think that's what the Veterans Action Council is really all about. is to help us expand that room in a constructive way. It's a real, like, real time crowdsource experiment. I'm loving it. It's scary, it's fun, and it's effective all at the same time. I was just thinking about yesterday, we've covered so much ground since we started this thing, and we've touched so many different places around the country already in just a short period of time. Really rivaling some of the stuff that I've done with veterans, for medical cannabis access in terms of years. So yeah, I'm having fun. Let's keep doing it. We'll get our voice heard. I don't think they're trying to stop us from having our voice heard in the movement. And as far as the United States and veterans go, get your act together, people. If you can't treat us, a handful of basically, otherwise sound human beings through a medical system, and get it right, and have us be happy with the services, then you're doomed to try to treat the rest of the country.
You sociologically broke it down pretty well. I mean, if they can't take care of this small percentage of, veterans, which are a small percentage of what their medical system is, then what hope does the public at large have? So, that's a real concern, a real discussion. We're gonna go to Alaska and Pearson. How do you feel about being a political pawn as a veteran?
I love it. I think it's the best thing. The best feeling I ever get is when somebody uses me as a political pawn. I'm joking. So just to add on to, or to throw out something about what Michael was saying. I think we are the wheel in that regard. I mean, yeah, reinventing the wheel. They come to us to try to gain power from our experiences, which means our experiences are the things that prove that we are worthy of the cause, or to rationalize what the person needs from, or the organization needs from us. That's why they're coming to us, because we are the ones that been there, that have done that and did it selflessly, and there is no real argument against a lot of the stuff that we do. So I just wanted to touch on that, but yeah, I was joking about enjoying being a pawn, except for the when it does good. If I'm if I'm able to take some time out of my life and assist with something that I don't get recognition for, but it does something I believe is a positive, even though someone else is getting the credit for it, I'm cool with that. Now, it would be great to get your cake and eat it too, where you get recognition and a good thing comes out of it. But when it comes as a whole, like where yeah, we're paraded out in front of some type of legislator or hearing to it's the same concept of saying, taking candy from a child who has cancer. It's like one of those things where you just no one's going to say no to that, because it's just because it pulls the heartstrings. But when we're willing and able to do the work, and we're willing to fight for the cause, and we just get undermined, or we do all the work, or majority of the work, and then it gets swooped up and taken from us, and used as someone else's material, or you presented as someone else's material. Yeah, that's where I start to have an issue with it. But I guess I don't know if I've ever used this term before, but the silver lining of it is most of the stuff that we do is for the greater good of Americans, of humanity, and I don't see a lot of evil that can come of our work. And if what we do brings someone or some peoples, whether they are whether they're ill, whether there's some wrongdoing brought upon them, and we're able to fix that. Whether or not we get the recognition, I think that's a win in our book. We'll know it, they'll know it. So what if the public doesn't know it? We're not in this for capital gain. We're in this to further humankind, really, and the betterment of America. That's all I got.
Thank you very much, Pearson. We're going to go now to Ohio. Mr. Robert Kowalski, how do you feel about being a political pawn as a veteran?
I think Pearson kind of touched on it pretty good in the fact that when it's used for good, it's not so bad. But then it brings up the question, what really is that good? Because when I look at policy and I look how the veteran population is kind of dangled like the carrot in front of the donkey, and we never really get the carrots never really caught, and so we're not really winning anything, because if we were winning something, then we wouldn't be here trying to figure out how to fix it. And so it's kind of infuriating to me that we're constantly utilized as this crash dummy on how things operate and how things work and how bad things are. And then we're put also as what we're crashing into. And it's infuriating that we get nowhere. It's kind of like it reminds me of the scene in Winnie the Pooh where they start walking around in circles, and then all of a sudden they show back up to the same spot over and over and over again. And they like don't understand how they got lost because they were headed in the right direction in the first place. So it's like a deja vu moment. So yeah, I guess the simple answer is it's infuriating. It's infuriating that we're the ones that are pulling these policies, yet we're not involved in that policy. We're not discussed with that policy, or we're forced to rely on outdated organizations that are out there losing members because it doesn't incorporate the new generation of veteran, the generation of veteran that's kind of making up the majority of veteran right now because of how long we've been at war. And so it's like we really don't have representation to represent us properly, to have an actual adequate voice to be utilized in a manner that's going to fulfill our mission, and that mission being the betterment and protection of our society. So that's what it really how I feel about that situation.
Thank you for your perspective. I greatly appreciate it. Now we're going to go to Duke. Duke, how do you feel about being used as a political pawn as a veteran? Can you hear us? All right. Well,
Sorry, can you hear me now?
there you go.
Oh, okay, because I'm just learning this thing. I don't even think I got my picture up, but I see my name, Duke, anyway, with the SOS PAC as your all's photographer with over 420 free photo albums to help with the movement, and especially with our veterans as well. And actually, I'll be up on, as far as your question, though, backtracking on that, I don't mind being as a pawn as long as it's benefiting the society and the people and especially our veterans. But if you're talking about like the way Henry Kissinger talking about our military men being used as pawn, as dumb, stupid animals, no, I don't appreciate that. But I do want to comment as well that, we are having that MORE Act coming in effect the 1st through the 4th. And I'm going to be up there with my cape. I know a bunch of you see my cape. Michael, you've even got one. And we had it flying at our hemp festival thing as well for the medical marijuana concept for everybody. And I've been selling them and pushing it. So anybody wants to come up, our veterans, and I have a few other capes and what have you, flags or what have you, but I want to get in there and help push that issue of the MORE Act. I'm a little confused with the treaty thing and what have you, but I'm understanding it better and better. Listen to Michael and others with you all speaking on it. I've just been caught up in a whirlwind, running here, running there, and some family issues and help, but who hasn't, I guess. But so I just wanted to bring an alert that I'm going to be up there on Capitol Hill. My understanding is they're going to vote on that MORE Act between the 1st and the 4th, and if not, then the following week to end prohibition. And so, so I'm going to be there pushing it because I know a number of the senators or congressmen, and I'm going to give them my 2 cents and push it for us. And anybody wants to come along, come along. Any other question? Because I came in late on this as well. I'm just figuring out what's going on. I just noticed it.
Yeah, we're going through asking a series of questions. So that's the first question. Now I'm going to ask the second question, and we're going to go through each of the individuals, and we'll come back to you as the last person again.
Okay, no problem.
The next question is how do you feel about others speaking for you? So we're going to go back and start with George. And George.
Could you say again, please? Say the second question again, please, at the end.
How do you feel about others speaking for you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, correct. So yeah, I guess this one was really what I've thought about these questions, and this one I just immediately had to, from my gut, like I don't like it. But that's just like my personal thing. Like I always want my voice to be heard, so I'm usually out there pushing what I think. For people that aren't willing to use their own voice. But obviously the question really is leaning towards when you don't have, like, I can't have somebody in Washington, D.C. speaking for me personally, right? But there's always going to be up there somebody's going to be up there speaking for vets. So I think in a huge a system like we have, there's always going to be somebody speaking for you. How I feel about it, I guess, would be based on how that person is doing. I guess that comes down to democracy. So you put that person in charge of speaking for you when you vote them into that office. So at times, I think it's just something that we have to rely on. When it comes to something that I'm passionate about, I would rather speak for myself anytime I have the chance, like I said. So yeah, I think that that's what I think about that. Basically, I don't enjoy somebody else speaking for me. Like it's just all my life I want to speak for myself. But like I said, there comes a time when you have to have somebody out in a large group like us. You're going to have somebody speaking for you. We aren't always going to be able to control that. So it's like a necessary evil. But I think it propagates the system that we have now that's this backlog of unsuccess, like Michael was talking about earlier. We're only trying to fix 1%, and they can't do that. right? So the people that are speaking for me now have basically got a SAT system. That's what makes me angry about it. I'd be a lot happier if I could see positive results for the people speaking for me. I think when it comes to cannabis issues, I don't think there's like it's a rarity in my state to have any politician speaking for me. If you don't go out and speak your own voice, it doesn't get heard. So um, that's basically how I feel about all sides of that. I'll pass it on to the next guy.
I agree. There's definitely a time and a place for um, speaking for you and having others speak for you, in the sense that, I definitely do speak to my congressperson or representative or somebody in the local government. However, I also make sure that they see my face and know the issue and have an understanding of uh, so I understand that there is definitely a need sometimes to give up your power and have somebody else speak for you and towards you. Tony, how do you feel about others speaking for you?
Well, it's not good. Etienne, the problem with it is you end up getting less than what you deserve. I mean, if you have, say like the cannabis industry, it came on, the states that were able to get medical or legal cannabis is always about the almighty dollar. It's the dispensary licenses, how much is how many are we going to get, and then the regulations are just crippling for people trying to get into the business anyway. But instead of using the tax dollars for law enforcement, when you don't get your voice, with the tax dollars should be used for education and healthcare, and put into prison reentry programs to reduce recidivism. Those things will help people out, but they're using the tax dollars on the cannabis to go into, to arrest more people with law enforcement stuff. And that's what you get when you don't have a voice, when you have just the money makers in law enforcement in there making the rules with cannabis, then you end up with a drug war light, and that's not right. We need to be able to have a voice and get a seat at the table so that we can get these get the dollars for these programs for veterans, to be able to enter the market, enter the free market of cannabis. We should be growing our own medicine and psilocybin mushrooms and all that. We should have a easy entry, as easy as it is to get into the alcohol industry. We should be able to get into this cannabis industry, and that's why we're not getting a voice, because it's all the money makers at the top deciding the rules, the law enforcement and the money makers. So I don't like when we don't get a voice, and I don't like when people speak for me either. So
Thank you very much, Tony. Rico, how do you feel about others speaking for you?
Again, if they're informed, if they're sincerely doing their best to represent the needs of myself and my community, like in this case, the veteran community, right? I have no problem. I'll support them and do whatever I can to assist in whatever it is that they're trying to do, whether it be like a piece of legislation or whatever, a program initiating. But if they're not representing my needs, but they're saying that they're speaking on behalf of me, I have an issue with that, especially if I'm not allowed at the table, if I'm being kept from the table, I take exception to it. So, in the case of the MORE Act, it's a perfect example for me. The veterans aren't mentioned in the MORE Act. This is something that, veterans have helped push this movement, from Jack Hare, Dennis Perone, others, yourself, Al Byrne, Michael, us, the new blood, 7 years into it, I'm still a baby in the movement. But we've been there. We've led the charge in a lot of states for a lot of battles fighting on behalf of patients. And when something like the MORE Act comes, this historic piece of legislation, where are we? We're not there. We're not mentioned. And when we ask for just a simple addition to include language that's been ripped out multiple times, that's been passed in a bipartisan fashion, to let us have discussions with our VA physicians, get recommendations for the programs that we're participating in already. And with one simple addition, one ask, beyond that, some voucher programs so that veterans on fixed incomes aren't having to decide between utilities, rent, car note, insurance, food, or medicine. And I didn't even mention any kind of recreational activity. Aside from how people like to look at cannabis in some states, right? You know, we're talking as patients, I'm talking as a patient. So in that case, no, man, I won't support the MORE Act, not as it's written right now. Not when, you know, veterans like myself, you know, haven't even, they're dead. They never got to see this vote that's coming up soon. We're here. We're still living through a suicide epidemic. We're still paraded about in the news and, you know, during the political campaigns and stuff like that. But we're still told to be quiet. Stay in our closets, stay in our lane. Let others do their job, you know? So it's annoying. And thank God for y'all and the Veterans Action Council. This is us, in my opinion, reclaiming our voice. And I'm really happy to be a part of it. How about that?
Thank you for your perspective. Very appreciated. We're going to go over to Michael Krowitz. How do you
Yeah,
feel about others speaking for you?
It's an interesting question. It reminds me, years ago, there's what I thought was a very instructive moment where there was a huge crowd that showed up at a WTO meeting, just a massive crowd of folks. And they were, of course, wanting to protest what they perceived as going on inside the WTO meetings. And they were caged off. This is the time of, if I remember correctly, George W. Bush's presidency. But nonetheless, many presidencies are the same in regard to how they treat these folks. And they cordoned them off into what they called a free speech zone about 2 miles away from the venue and the event that was going on. And at the same time, this is something I learned, that you would have been able to buy into that particular WTO meeting. It was about a $15,000 buy-in, and you would essentially have like a luncheon meeting with the members of the commission, of the panel that you wanted to talk to, the WTO. And had they all, this massive crowd, had they designated to someone to speak for them, or even a small delegation of people to speak for them, chipped in just pennies per person, and they could have actually bought in and had a face-to-face meeting with the people that they essentially had no impact on. They really had very little impact on any of the media, had no direct contact with any of the people that were participating. So I think that's a really interesting story, an instructive story about how if you don't delegate, if you don't, you know, play that game a little bit, at least you can really be boxed out. You can really have almost no access to the process. But at the same time, you have to balance that with when you need to speak personally. And on the other side, I'll tell another story. It's funny, the mentors and stories and stuff. And before I say it, I want to, say to Rico, I still feel like the new guy. I still have like Chris Conrad and others that taught me the ropes. That I seriously feel like I'm still the new guy. So get used to it. You're gonna be doing it for a while. but anyway, yeah. Shoot, where was I going now? The speaking for you, and shoot, I got lost in the moment now. I can't remember where I was going with that thought. Help me again with the
You had
question.
another
Remind
little
me.
anecdote you were going to share with us.
Oh yeah. Thank you. I knew you could help me with that. So yeah. All right. Why you need to participate individually, right? That's the second half of that question. And my good buddy John Sajo, one of the instrumental people at the foundation of our cannabis movement nationally, basically one of the principal people responsible for Oregon's decrim, and that was a backbone effort to the movement, kind of like Prop 215 was. John, at some point over the last few years, is like, this is just too painful and too much work for me to participate in this process. And essentially, I was getting from him the sort of same vibe that you were just getting about, trying to participate. And what he started doing was he would monitor everything going on, watch really carefully, and anything that they did that screwed up or they didn't do right or they didn't do enough or whatever, he'd just show up at the last minute with his notebook and go to the legislature and explain to them how they got it wrong. They'd fix it, and then he'd go home. And worked out actually a lot better for him, a lot less time, spent involved in the process. So I think that does illustrate well that individuals are very much needed, especially as we're getting into this area where, especially right now we're in this area where it's sort of a transition moment, where you have a lot of new lobbyists speaking for a lot of new firms and new corporate interests, new industry that don't really know much about cannabis at all, and they're sort of trying to learn their way around. While that transition happens, we're especially needed in the process as citizens to watch over the process and to make sure that policies are set up with the best balance that you can find between balancing the needs of industry and corporate interest and balancing the needs of the public and the environment and stuff. So yeah, I think that that's something that we all need to participate in individually, but collectively you need to know when to delegate. What do they say at the end? That's the hardest job to learn, how to delegate, right?
Yes, it is. It's a challenge, and one that it takes time and mistakes to master, like anything else, right? Thank you for your perspective, Michael. It's always wonderful and it's always insightful. Pearson, how do you feel about others speaking for you?
Well, I guess it all depends on what they're speaking about. I think if it's done correctly, if I've been consulted with, or someone of a like nature, or someone that's well informed and is able to inform the person that's going to be speaking on behalf of veterans, fills them in with our concerns and what our present state is and what our thoughts and our position is on it. I think that's the most important thing, because we're not going to be able to speak on our own behalf all the time. When it comes to who speaks on our behalf, that's also important, because it is what we're doing is, I believe, to be a very sensitive topic, and not a lot of people are willing to speak on behalf of cannabis and veterans issues. We're subject to less than par medical care, and it's something that is very personal to all of us. Obviously, it's our healthcare, it's our lives, it's our well-being, and it's something that is our lives, really. I mean, it affects so many people more than just us. Our reasoning behind what we do is not only to benefit us, but to benefit our families. And if someone is able to articulate what we go through correctly, more so than we can, I'm all for that. as long as we're consulted, and not specifically me, but someone that is well informed or someone that has lived through it and is in the know. I think it's fine, or I have no problem with it. But when someone just assumes what we're feeling, what we're going through, what we're doing, what we have to do, that's when I have issue with it. It going back to delegation of responsibilities, I think that is the most important thing in any leader's toolbox. If you can't delegate a responsibility to the right person, you're not an effective leader, because you can't do everything. You might think you can, but that's a downfall for most leaders, is the medium between, which is usually not, I guess, not a happy medium, micromanaging and allowing for freedom of your subordinate leaders and or superior leaders, which is something that has to be closely monitored. And I believe if you have the right person in the right position to articulate the things that we need as a collective, I'm all about it. But to just go out and speak on behalf of us without actually knowing us is something that I'm absolutely against.
Thank you, Pearson. Robert, how do you feel about others speaking for you?
Well, it really makes me think a lot about who is speaking for me or the veteran community, right? And right now there's way too many hands in the cookie jar. So I'm not really sure who's speaking for me and what they're saying for me, because it's too hard to keep track. So I think back to like military life, and I think back to chain of command. When you couldn't speak for yourself, it was your CO, or your the next level up, your supervisor, that would speak for you. But they wouldn't speak for you unless they dealt with you. Because then how could they appropriately represent you? Or it's like an attorney showing up to court to represent you for a case and never once speaking to you to know what you want, what you did, to get the facts. And so it's infuriating and frustrating that there are so many people out there speaking in the name of veterans, speaking in the name of disabled veterans, and none of them necessarily even have the know-how to do so, or it's unknown or been announced to me who they consulted in the first place to retrieve that information. And so that's kind of where I stand on that question. Is it's kind of like trying to figure out who actually is representing you, who actually is speaking for you, and then trying to figure out if they are then speaking appropriately about you.
Thank you, Robert. We're going to go over to Duke. Duke, how do you feel about others speaking for you? Are you there, Duke? All right.
Sorry, I hit the unmute somehow or something. But starting over is, for the most part, Duke, I'd prefer speaking for myself based on my experience and what have you, accepted in some cases where I'm not as well versed on the issue. And I'd rather have somebody who's, more experienced with it, because initially I started this movement more so from the photographic end as a photographer of photographing the movement and sharing it. And that was the way I spoke. But then as I got more familiar and more confident, then I started speaking up and realizing how much my life had been more involved with this and my military experience and bipolarness and what have you. And so, it depends on the scenario. Like I worked with Michael there, Mike Grivich, with a new group we formed in Virginia, the V.A.C.l, Virginia Marijuana Justice, or Virginia Mary Jane for the people of Virginia, because we're questioning some other organizations not really representing the people as well. And so, and speaking up. And so I'm very confident in Michael going ahead and speaking for us in most of those cases when we're handling it. And I just documented it photographically and share with the people. Just like I want to share with you all right now, some of you already know, but it looks like I'll be able to repost them as long as I get to it by midnight on 11/11/15 Veterans Day. Weed for Warriors and Patients at a Time. We dumped over about 1,000 pill bottles on the White House sidewalk. That we got great coverage on that, and I'm gonna get ready and repost it and reshare it, because that's one thing I learned about being a photographer and sharing, is that way you get the word out and the knowledge out. And that's what my SOS pack has been mainly about: saving our society, pulling all communities together and being a networker. And that's what I've mainly done. But in backtracking on the speaking part, well, I think I pretty much covered it. In most cases, I try and speak up. I've learned to speak up and get more confident and expressing it. But in some issues, I'm not. I'd rather have other people that I feel are more experienced and more versed, as long as I know where they're coming from, what they're doing. And I guess that's it in a nutshell. But enjoy the photos that are out there. There's over 420 different free photo albums in the SOS pack, which used to be Saving Our Society with Police and Citizens Together, because I first started as community policing and helping the homeless. But then I met Leap, Howard, and Neil Franklin, Howard Woolbridge. And so then I started taking on the movement of legalizing cannabis, and it has truly helped me. I've been smoking about 50 years now, and I used to be bipolar, now I'm just manic. And I'll end it with that. Enjoy the photos as I post them out there.
Well, thank you, Duke. One of the things I learned early is that my voice was not represented out there. So, and one of the things I learned early is if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I've always wanted to be at the table. So I learned early on with Dr. Todd McArea. He taught me to lobby at a local level in Berkeley. And of course, I've worked in Sacramento at the state level. And I've also testified federally, and lobbied federally since '94. So I learned early and often that how powerful your individual voice is, and how many people you can represent, anywhere from 100 to 10,000 people, depending on where you come from in your district and who you're speaking to and what you're speaking toward. And experience as a veteran, I've always found, is a way to get your foot in the door, and a way to definitely get in there. Now, I also know as I can't be in every meeting and I can't do everything. So, building alliances, being part of alliances are key factors to coming up with ways on how we can solve these frustrations, which is my final question to each of you, which is, how do you fix this? What's the fix? What do you suggest to fix somebody from feeling like a political pawn, or then they feel like somebody is speaking for you? Um, how do you feel about that? What's your fix? What do you suggest to people now that they can actually alter and change this? So we're going to go back to George. And George, what's your solution?
Well, I think the solution is groups like the Veterans Action Council, quite frankly. We having somebody like building off what you just said about wanting to be at the table, to have your voice heard, very much what I was saying. And sometimes when you do that as a group, that's huge. And I did it for other organizations like Arthritis Foundation. So you're representing thousands and thousands of people. So it becomes a very powerful thing when you're the voice for somebody else, right? So I think that's part of the solution, but you also have to give that up. Part of the solution is giving that up and having having the relationships in groups like this, where that your voice is being heard, because as a group, as a larger group, they're taking into the consideration the as veterans, as an example, the veteran community, right? So the Veterans Action Council, instead of me just being one guy or one organization, I think we do much better for ourselves when groups come together like this. And as far as having other people speak for me, I think I'll stay right where I'm at. I'll try to take my seat at the table if I'm allowed to. And I'll keep screaming whether they want to listen to me or not. And I'll keep being politically active. I don't think you can be a part of the solution in these problems when if you're not being politically active. You have to go and get in front of these people and tell them how you feel if you're given any opportunity. They all have local offices, so I think the solution is to stay in front of them. If you want your voice to be heard, go out there and make it be heard, and then join larger groups where you can have your voice be heard with more power, because there is much more power. You bring yourself much more power when your voice is a combined voice of a group.
Thank you very much, George. Now we're going to go over to Tony Landry. What's your fix?
Okay, can you please repeat the question again?
What's the fix? So now that we've
Okay.
gone through these two discussions, which are being a political pawn and others speaking for you, what's your solution to people who are watching so that they could?
Well, the solution be de-escalate the war. Stop the arrest, and get out in your community and talk to your police chief and ask them to lower the priority of the arrest, and talk to the county prosecutor, ask them to stop taking felony cannabis charges. And the solution is get involved on any level, whatever level you can handle. Whether it's just click a like and a share on one of Veterans Action Council's posts, and getting the word out like that. It helps us out. It helps the movement. But yeah, certainly de-escalate the war and repair the damages. We, like I was saying earlier, the move is always about the money, getting the licenses, but we're not talking about the people in prison right now that might have been using it for medical purposes. They get left behind. And so we need to continue speaking out for them, giving them a voice. And I'm just happy to be a part of this council. And I think we're going to do some great things. So thank you.
Thank you kindly, Tony. Rico, what's your fix?
Well, as far as being used as a pawn and having others speak for me, my suggestion would be for an individual, if they were feeling that way, like everybody's been saying, is, get involved. Whatever your issue is, whatever your passion is, whatever you feel like you're not being heard on, find a way to get heard on it. There's a number of different ways you can go about it. for us, clearly, we found real value in forming this council so that we can share with one another our individual experiences in our respective states across the country, with our different systems that we've been working with, the different realities that we have on the ground here. And now we're using that to address the overall issue that we've all been, trying to figure out how to pick at and tackle. So that would be my individual fix. This council, continue to form this bond that we got going on. There's power in numbers, many hands make light work. And when we're at the table with reasonable solutions, right? We've identified a number of problems and issues within our communities and individual lives. So we have some suggestions and potential solutions that we would like heard. That's a good way to start. I don't know if it's a fix per se, but I feel it's certainly a good start.
Thank you very much. Michael Crowitz. Solutions of a fix?
Yeah, man. A fix, there's a fix. I don't know if there's a fix. Excuse me.
That's part of the fix.
They say vape pens are easier on your lungs, but I don't know. They get you coughing. But anyway, yeah, I think that what was it? Thomas Jefferson said, eternal vigilance was your cost of freedom, right? I don't know. It seems like when I've worked with other people really closely across a bunch of different lines, when everybody listened to their own heart and really paid attention to what was going on, everybody worked together really seamlessly. But when they tried to look over each other's shoulders and look at how they were doing, seeing if they were doing their job well enough, maybe you could do that job better, that micromanaging. And it seems funny because it seems now connected to the last thing that you were talking about, Etienne, about micromanaging as a result of not doing good delegation of authority. It is fascinating. So I think that's kind of the thing you have to figure out for yourself. You have to, kind of pay attention to what you're interested in and get involved. I had all these different sayings dropping into my head as I was here listening to others talk. Lennis Worth jumped into mind. Duke knows her, really great activist in Virginia and been working forever to try to help change the laws here in Virginia. And she would say, just show up. Showing up is half the battle.
Right.
You just show up. And then I remember a saying as well about, the history is written by those who show up, right? So I think that's a thing. If you actually show up and you participate, then you're part of the solution. You're actually part of that solution. And if you don't show up, then what's that another saying? There's all these bumper stickers that jumped in mind. The other one, all it takes for evil to flourish, for good people to do nothing, right? I think that's a really great saying. It seems to have a lot of truth to it. So that's all it really takes is for everybody to pay a little bit of attention to what you think is important. I think people, especially in the modern age, really rather recently, maybe 10, 20 years, have gotten so specialized, and people just assume that somebody's doing it. And I think that would be the only bit of advice that I would give to people is don't assume things. Don't assume somebody's doing stuff. It's amazing how you get 1,000 people together, and out of that 1,000 people, 10 people show up, and out of the 10 people, 2 people wind up doing most of the work. So show up.
Thank you, Michael. And wise words from a very wise sage. Pearson, what's your suggested
Oh,
fix?
well, it's 4:20 here. Got to throw that out there. Well, the fix, or the way to, from what I gather, is to become more involved. That's the only way you're going to get anything accomplished, is go out and express your point of view, your passion, your rights, and what you think is wrong. And if you don't do that, nobody knows. So there's no way of defending what is said about your specific struggles, or the groups that you are with or fall under. If you don't say anything, nobody knows it, and it's just the squeaky wheel that that gets the grease, you know. And I mean, that's really it. Get out and do it. Like, I've been contemplating politics for a long time, and it's just one of those things where it's like, do you really want to have to compromise your integrity, or go in and make
What the hell?
sorry,
Oh,
excuse me. Sorry, I'm getting blown up by my better half. I should start using my computer more often. But it's something that that you have to go out. Your politicians work for you. I think many people don't realize that they actually work for us, and we need to go out and get in front of them, bug them. That's their job. We pay them, and make sure they know where we stand, and if they are going to speak on our behalf. If anyone's going to speak on our behalf, it is our responsibility to go out and make sure they know how where we stand and where we are on it, and how real life is with any topic that is important or affects our lives, or families' lives, or our community. It's not easy. It doesn't happen a lot because people are lazy in general. Not pointing any fingers, I'm lazy too, but if you want something done, you got to go out and let it be known, and let the people that are put in place to represent us, our communities, our nation, know what is up, what is really happening. Because otherwise, in a lot of ways, people live in their own bubbles, and if that bubble isn't, if you don't encroach on that bubble every once in a while and let them know, hey, there's some suffering, there's some stuff that's going wrong, they're never going to know about it. And it's like a chief, there's a Alaskan chief that went up to a priest, or a missionary in Alaska, and said, if you hadn't told me about heaven and hell, or if you hadn't told me about hell, would I have gone there? And the priest said no. So that's a little, I guess it's a little dark quote there, but really, if somebody doesn't know about something, they're ignorant to it, and they need to, when it comes to this situation, we need to make sure, reinforce that they know, and not assume. Everybody knows the saying of assuming, and it's never good. And people are unmistakably a lot alike, and you can't just assume that they know what you're going through, whether it's somebody you sleep next to every night, or somebody you talk to once a month at some meeting. If you have a issue and there's something going on, you need to let it be known, and not assume that these people, or the people closest to you, the people that are most distant to you, actually know how you feel, your stance on it, what you're going through. And that's it. At the end of the day, communication, communicate. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Pearson. Robert, what's your fix?
So I think it boils down to education. I think it's pertinent for us as individuals in today's society with the internet at our fingertips to pursue education in all avenues and respects of it. And you don't necessarily have to pay for that education. So when it comes to issues like veterans issues or cannabis or anything that someone would be passionate about or feels affects them, the first step, in my opinion, is education. Educate yourself on the topic. Make yourself the expert in that topic. And then through that education, you will start to figure out who you need to approach to address that topic. And it's through these steps that you'll find, just like Mike kind of addressed earlier, between the education and showing up, I think those are the two main components at really creating change and creating the fix. It's through the education that you learn where to show up too. And I think that's a very important piece to the puzzle. It's one thing to show up, but if you show up to the wrong place, then it doesn't necessarily do you any good. So at large, I believe that education and showing up are the two main components in that.
I wholeheartedly agree. Duke, what's your
Well, I agree as well. Pretty much everybody's covering a lot of the bases of what I was going to say. Like Robert was just talking about, as Michael said, that Lennis says, show up. That's key. But with the coronavirus now thing, that's a lot harder. So we have to kind of at least light up their phones or light up their emails when it comes to representatives or people we want to get the word out. Or I could use a couple of different acronyms that I like to explain it to help with the fixes, to hemp it forward, to help educate the misinformed people, to help educate more people, to help end marijuana prohibition. And that's what I learned through the National Press Club when I had a photography business with Furman DeSantis, and I'm done. He should have been a law firm. But anyway, is that the National Press Club used to recommend me as a photographer, and I wasn't even a member, but I was pretty good at what I did back in the day. And I learned from them, and I missed it. I took a sabbatical after 6 foreclosures, 3 bankruptcies, and a divorce to be kind of a rolling stoner, thrifty guy and different handyman, this and that. But as I'm getting back in my photography, my activists that I miss, I said, that's how to get it out there from National Press Club. They would refer me, and I weren't even a member, but that's how they got the word out. When it came to an organization or a new press release or a new issue, you get the names of the organizations out there, you get the names of the key people out there, you get the product out there, you get the pictures out there. And so that's the way I'm approaching it, to put the word out, to share it, to help wake more groups up. And as you say as well, get involved with the ones that you feel, that will help with your movement. I'm getting more involved with different veterans groups as well as I set myself up as a photographer of We the People, because I'm an old film photographer and I took a sabbatical for a while because I didn't want to learn these damn computers or digital age. But in order to get the word out or to move ahead with it, I'm getting there slowly but surely. And so that's what we got to do. And then our politicians, like right now, one of the things I heard is like West Virginia that was moving ahead a little bit on some stuff, is mainly they were calling them, they were emailing them. That way, they might be able to bump you from a meeting, but they can't really bump you from the phone call that has to be recorded and logged in on what you're calling about and what your position is, especially if you're a constituent. So we need to wake up all the different people in different areas to contact their representatives, especially when certain bills are coming forth that involves us or them, and to get the word out, to share it, and so to share more and to help, wake more people up and to hold the politicians accountable and let them know. Because one time when they told me when I was speaking to Fairfax County General Assembly, whatever. Anyway, they said, Mr. Dunn, your time's up. I said, fine, you need to leap and lead for the future. And, you know, with the law enforcement against prohibition and law enforcement action, diversion, assisted diversion. And because we the people are getting tired of being treated like criminals, and you need to work for we the people more, your constituents that you're here to represent. We're going to check you out and call you out on opensecrets.org. That will give you their top 20 sponsors / donors, how much money, and their voting records on bills that affect us. And so we got to let them know that we're watching them like watchdogs. We're not going to take their shit anymore. And stand up for our rights and do like we did, go make different press conference or whatever over at the VA. And if I can help, I'm in and out of Washington all the time. I'll come by if I can and document and share pictures to help back it up. And please tap into any of my pictures. I did a few events at the Veterans Administration with DC, MJ. I don't want to put a plug in for them because that was another thing. We just had they were working with the catharsis on the mall, a vigil for healing that is pretty big. When they first got it started, it had to be on her Veterans Weekend. It's been popping up, you know, with different pictures and stuff. And so that's a good group. And I like that with the DCMJ, the MDMJ, and now the VAMJ. And we need MJ nationwide, every damn state. Start putting different networks and words out to just get people more involved, and they're starting to do it. Actually, I just got invited. Another group is talking about I forget how they worded it, but it's like they want to bring up a new party called the what is it? Not the Economicas, but the ecological. I can't. Anyway, I just blasted or we'll share it shortly. But just keep putting the word out, put pictures out, and tag like people were saying, tag and share, like, you know, and just keep on them like foosball, keep hammering away and we'll get it. Right now, that's normally I wear like my cowboy or rawhide hat, but since they want to thank us veterans, I've kind of switched over to wear my veterans hat more so when I go to different events, along with my cannabis cape that I got knighted with at the 45th annual smoking at the White House. And what I love about it, it says what it is. It's like a picture that's worth 1,000 words. It shows the green leaf, and I don't give a damn if it's hemp or cannabis and the medical cordoza. And history has proven it, and we the people have proven it, and science has proven it with their patent of 6630507. So screw them. Now is time for action. If you ain't representing people, we need to prepare to be getting them out, voting them out, and get on them. And it's happening. So there, I guess. Stay on them, share the photos, share the information, and I'm glad to be here. I think this is a great network for it as well, and I'm glad to put in my 2 cents and hear from you all as well.
Well, thank you, Duke. We appreciate you coming by, and we appreciate all of you. I agree with all of you. One of the ways I found was to find a local organization and plug in. And if you're looking what to do, then, you know, join a local, regional, or college club. If you're in college, even there's some high school groups. Join a national organization, you know, plug in, volunteer, immerse yourself, educate yourself on the issue so that you can speak toward it. You know, don't be afraid to ask questions of, you know, people in those groups. That's what they're there to do. You know, we're not trying to spread misinformation. We want to educate you so that you can represent us well and push things forward. You know, state groups, there's State Americans for Safe Access groups. There's the organizations like the National Cannabis Industries Association, which has national lobby days. Americans for Safe Access has national lobby days. Here in California, California Normal and ASA have lobby days up in Sacramento. So you can actually come volunteer your time, and they're going to volunteer their time to teach you how to actually lobby and push the issues in a way that you never thought possible, so that you can actually push your voice as well as put action behind your voice. So, you know, as Duke was saying, you know, if you have a creative outlet like he has, he found his creative outlets through photography, others through speaking, others through just showing up. So I think the most important and a very important thing that was discussed and reiterated by pretty much everyone, because everyone here is plugged in. We plugged in nationally. We plugged in locally. Michael is plugged in to us internationally. So he has shown us also how we can use our voice to actually take it even higher. When we thought nothing was happening, Michael was actually putting, rubber to the road and moving things forward in a way that here we are arriving at it currently. Next week, December 2nd, is the actual vote. So uh, being aware of what's going on and plugging in and finding ways to plug in, we've shown and talked about different examples. So all we're missing now is you plugging in, joining us. Stop sitting on the sidelines and waiting for your voice to be heard. No one can speak for you. Only you can speak for you. And there's too few of us out here speaking. And fortunately, we have some few educated ones, but we don't have enough. So we need you to plug in. We need you to go to school and get educated. We need you to become parts of these organizations and become leaders in your community, um, because it's needed. Don't be afraid of your power. Be afraid of somebody else taking your power from you. You know, you were right. Absolutely. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And we have to stay vigilant all the time. We're 21 years at Berkeley Patients Group, and we're still having to fight things at a local and state level during this pandemic. So it's par for the course. So once you plug in, it becomes a responsibility, but it's a responsibility that many of us have shown that we can handle and take an issue and move it forward in ways that we never thought possible. Are we where we want to be? No, but we're building toward a better tomorrow so that we can arrive at tomorrow, and maybe on December 2nd we'll be saying, wow, things just changed for the entire world. We'll look forward to see how that happens. I would like to thank all of our guests tonight: Tony Landry, George Armstrong, Rico Pereira, Michael Crowitz, Robert Kowalski, Pearson, Kennedy Crosby, and also Duke for being here. And I'm your guest, Etienne Fontan. I thank you all very much for showing up and listening to us veterans speak our minds. And we hope you learned something, as well as you can take something to show and educate others, so that when they're frustrated, we can you can actually show them that there are people who are not just sitting around doing it, that there are teachers showing us how we can step up and actually plug in, because we need you out there in every state, in every part of the country, and internationally, especially internationally if things change real soon. Thank you very much from the Veterans Action Council for our roundtable number 3. We wish you a good night.
Good night, everyone.